Chris, the testimony late today was dramatic, and it was all about Vice President Cheney. An FBI witness was on the stand and brought in evidence showing that Scooter Libby and Vice President Cheney may have discussed with each other leaking Valerie Wilson's identity to reporters as a way of undercutting administration critic Joe Wilson. The FBI agent was on the stand summarizing the answers that Scooter Libby gave in his initial FBI interviews. Scooter Libby was asked about a crucial conversation with Vice President Cheney on Air Force Two when they were flying back to Washington and trying to figure out how they were going to deal with inquiries from several reporters who were writing about Joe Wilson. This was the conversation where the evidence has already established that Vice President Cheney wrote out a series of talking points for Scooter Libby to essentially read to the reporters. But Scooter Libby was asked during this conversation on board Air Force Two, did you and Vice President Cheney discuss leaking Valerie Wilson's identity to reporters? Libby replied, according to the FBI agent, yes, we may have. This is a huge deal politically as far as the vice president is concerned. It's also a very big deal legally as far as Scooter Libby is concerned, because it's yet another nail in the coffin for prosecutors to show that Scooter Libby had motive to lie about his statements about where he learned information about Valerie Wilson. Scooter Libby has testified in the grand jury and to the FBI that he forgot about all the government officials who may have told him about Valerie Wilson, and that he first learned about it from a reporter. But again, this shows motive for the prosecution. This helps them show that Scooter Libby had a motive to try to obstruct and try to block the investigation.
Well, I want to ask you about political motive here. The vice president, we know, triggered this trip to Africa by the query he took to the CIA. We've got that evidence so far. So why would he go out and try to diminish the trip by saying it was that Joe Wilson was suggested, his name was suggested by his wife who works at the CIA? Why was Cheney trying to kill the trail that led back to him, that he was the triggering force that led to this trip to Africa on uranium?
Because to suggest that for the vice president to suggest that he essentially started the ball rolling by asking the CIA about this raw intelligence that Saddam was seeking uranium from Iraq, and then for the public to know and to find out from Joe Wilson that, in fact, yes, the CIA acted on that information, sent somebody to Africa, found out that the information was not true, and then for this information to still get into the present State of the Union, essentially the blame could have been put on Vice President Cheney for either not following up about what did the CIA do with his request, or did the vice president know about what the CIA did once they got their conclusions, and the vice president somehow allowed this information to be in the State of the Union anyway? But at the time period of this, of course, Chris, in July of 2003, weapons of mass destruction had not been found in Iraq. There was an uproar over the very idea that the administration had gotten something wrong, and all signs, of course, were pointing to the vice president's office, and here was the vice president's office trying to hit back. And all along, the key question has been, in hitting back at an administration critic, did they cross the line? Did they leak information about his wife? And for the first time today, we now have evidence in this case that the vice president and his chief of staff, who were trying to figure out how to deal with the media uproar caused by Joe Wilson, that they actually may have discussed Wilson's wife and using that information against Joe Wilson. And when you put that in the broader context of charges that the vice president's chief of staff later tried to obstruct the investigation into the CIA leak, it begins to put the pieces together. Chris?
Okay, thank you very much, David Shuster. I never thought WMD was the motive for this war. That's why the president and the vice president were not upset when they didn't find any in Iraq. It wasn't the reason we went there.